But yeah, let's sync offline. Francis, you are muted.
I said I was going to kickstart recording. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 2nd, Istio Ambient Weekly Contributors Meeting. So on the agenda, I don't know who's, let me present first. Hang on. All right, so I have to run in about 20 minutes or so. I have a meeting at 10:30. So who's got this first agenda? I don't see anyone's name on it.
Oh, that's mine. Sorry about that.
Okay. Keith, would you go ahead and take over the presentation?
I think I can.
Yeah, you should be able to just present.
I think I've got the permissions to. I'm just learning Google Meet presenting. It's my third meeting tool. Give me a little bit here to figure out how to get this going. Okay. All right, all right, let's see this start working. All right, so yes, is that the right one? Is that the old meeting notes?
Yeah, that's the, you're presenting a meeting note.
Okay, good.
Can you, yeah, just go ahead
Cool.
and click on the thing. There you go.
Yes. So wanted to give an update on these docs. I put them out 2 or 3 weeks ago. They need TOC approval because of their size. We've got 1 out of the 6 for approval with some pretty good discussion on them. I think I just want to give an FYI that because of the nature of these and because they are kind of holding up any future API things when it comes to Ambient, want to kind of ask if folks would be okay with me starting at least the API changes, getting those staged in PRs so that folks can maybe get a better idea of what it will look like, and we can make a little bit of progress. If that would be cool to kind of have like a lazy consensus model for the API changes at least, just so that we can get started on it. Because at this point, we only have 1 out of the 6 TOC members, and the only questions seem to be about implementation, rolling this out, feature flag behavior, things like that. So, yeah. Any strong opinions here? All right.
I feel like the first thing is going to be an API PR, and then that's immediately going to go to the TOC members anyways, right? Or I guess you can just use the local API fork in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. The reason why I bring that up is, yes, it's TOC gated, but I believe it only require 1 or 2 TOC member reviews, and so I want.
Wow, that's the technical level. Like, we're not going to actually approve this with only 1 TOC member approval, given the scope of the change.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess the other way I guess I can phrase this is like, what does TOC need anything from me to get this ball rolling? I'll see if I've got any questions.
Yeah, so one thing I would like to ask, if it's possible, is to maybe give some examples, which I think you will need the examples when you submit the PR in the API repo anyway. So it would be good to have some examples on how layer uses with unspecified transport and applications.
Okay, sure. I can definitely add that.
You know, like we have example in the alternative consideration. Yeah, I think that would be very helpful to help people like visualize the thing.
Okay, I will add the examples for like targeted. That's a good idea. For the target ref proposal here, I think I'm showing that one. For that one, do we are there other needs here? Any extra clarification needed on this doc?
I think this one makes a lot of sense. We just need to decide which option we should go with. I think that may be the only thing that hasn't reached consensus, but I think people generally agree the target ref.
Okay. So I guess my question to that is, does ambiguity on the option preclude, or would ambiguity on the option, if you haven't decided on the option yet, would that preclude the API itself changing? Because if this is the only open question, this is an implementation question, would that preclude an API change? Yes, no, maybe?
Sorry, if you were waiting on an answer from me, I got distracted, so I didn't hear the question.
Anybody really, but my question was, since the open question here, as Lynn said, is around which option we decide for how waypoints interact with legacy label selector API. If that's the only open question, then would that preclude the API change itself, since it's
I
an
don't think
implementation
so.
detail?
I don't
Yeah,
think
I don't
necessarily
think
because the change is going to be probably to start with like hide from docs anyways, and it's not going to be permanent. I mean, it will be semi-permanent, but it's not like users are going to instantly start using it or anything. So I think we can iterate on it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
No, this is for after we're done with this thread of topic.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So that's the case, then what I'm hearing is good to create the API change for target ref, but need some examples for the layer target authorization policy doc. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's from Lynn. What I wanted to ask was directly to Eric and Mitch, what is needed to go from where we are to where you have approved the docs?
I'll try to get to that before next Wednesday.
And I'm just reviewing it now, so I don't think there's anything really.
Yeah, I think Neeraj reviewed this one. I'm going to pin Louis. Unfortunately, he's on vacation, but he should be able to review next Wednesday.
All right, much appreciated. Thank you. Costin?
So kind of a follow-up for previous discussion in Istio. What is the expectation for users who are using sidecars when this API is no longer hidden and so forth, and it's available?
Which API specifically, the target ref one?
Yeah, target ref. Would you expect sidecar users to, I mean, if a policy has target ref, do you expect sidecar users to also apply it?
No. So this proposal is specifically for waypoint policy. Actually, there's a section in there about the valid kinds for the target ref, and right now the only valid kind is gateway. I guess technically that would still allow them to apply policy to a gateway, like a gateway API flavored ingress gateway.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I thought I said something in here about that. I don't remember where I landed on this. Maybe. No, that's not it. Yes, okay. Finds gateway, and this pros in this field to be allowed for all gateways ingress as well. but if those are managed via Gateway API and not Istio API. So yes, the proposal would allow sidecar users to use target ref to apply policy to ingress gateway.
Okay, I mean, I don't have strong opinions. It's just if there is any risk of any backward compatibility changes or anything for the old style users, we may need to be careful. But as long as it's clearly specified and we test for it, that's okay.
Yeah, this probably information probably about like a hierarchy of target ref is there, then don't and is there and is valid, then don't even look at workload selector. That's how we about there. Okay, thank you. I'll get started on those action items. Thank you, everybody.
So who's got Z-tunnel hairpinning?
Stephen, I believe.
Yeah.
Stephen, would you like to present?
Yeah, is it working?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I think most everybody has seen it at this point. I tried to reorganize it a bit just to make it, just take everybody's comments into account. But I kind of split the doc into trying to answer two questions, which is how do we control what happens, whether we deny, whether we even let it into the Z-tunnel, etc. And then for the cases that we do allow, how we want to forward that traffic. Honestly, I don't think I understand this problem as well as others here. Like it seems like Costin and John and Ben all had pretty strong opinions. But the things that I think we were going to rule out are probably using a fake identity. It sounds like that just adds special case complexity all over the place, and it's not really worth doing, and that doing plain TLSH bone would work okay. But I don't know. Where do we want to start? On the like the user opt-in, opt-out mechanism, or the actual forwarding mechanism? Okay, we'll start with this. Costin kind of suggested using network policy as one of the major ways to control this. I assume that's just as far as like saying we can allow this set of things in ambient to talk to things that are not in ambient or vice versa. So I don't know if you can help elaborate. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundamental problem with that we need to answer is how do we deal with non-mesh traffic, meaning that if you have a workload that it's clearly not using ambient or Istio classic, do we pretend that we apply some policies to it and we clearly define what policies apply to this subset of workloads that don't have identity and they use plain text or network security? And how does it impact that traffic if they are using network policy and other policies outside? Because if you have someone using Cilium or using some native implementation or using regular Kubernetes with network policies, they expect that stuff to keep up obeying whatever they defined.
Right.
So
I mean,
we need to have very clear definition. Okay, if a workload is not Istio, is not using workload identity, which subset of our APIs apply to them, what kind of telemetry we generate, if we generate, and how we break other CRDs in Kubernetes if ambient is enabled only halfway.
well, we definitely shouldn't break network policy. I definitely agree with that. But as far as like you're saying, we only apply some undefined subset of L7. I think John already explained it in one of the comments, but I think that since policy is mostly defined kind of like from a server side perspective, or we should apply whichever policies we can. So if something's written around using specific identities, that would definitely get denied. But if we are saying we don't want post requests, or we don't want requests to these paths, and we can sniff the traffic and we can do that, we should still do that.
But
if
this is
it's
not written
it's
in our,
encrypted by something underneath, then obviously we can't do that.
but our API is not written this way. I mean, we don't say that, some fields, this particular field of the API works and this one doesn't work. And we cannot expect a user to understand, what are the subtle combinations that work and don't work and what is broken on the other side if, their existing policies. Neither is documented.
Well, how do you fix that then? Like, it feels like you're saying that a few things will break and users won't understand that, so we should make everything break.
No, not pretend that we apply authorization policy when we apply some fields and others we don't.
How is it pretending? Like, what fields of authorization policy do we not apply? I get that we don't apply routes. That's clear.
Anything related with identity.
It is
Since
applied.
mesh is based on identity.
The client has no identity, and you can take that into account in your policy. I'm not sure I understand. Unless you're talking about the current case, I think everyone agrees is broken, that we somehow impersonate the identity. That's total bogus. Everyone agrees it has to go, I think. But what we will, in my opinion, should say is that when the policy is evaluated, it will be evaluated as if the client has no identity, because they don't, right? In that case, I don't think we have partially evaluated policy, right?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's if traffic was previously working between two pods because they were using network policy or they're just working without Istio, and then suddenly we had this interception, then you stop working because Istio policy will probably not say allows this weird unknown policy or unknown identity, and so by enabling ambient on a pod, you will break traffic if Istio is using, it's not modifying policy to put this unknown as if it is, pretend Istio workload.
I think I'm more confused now. So the concern is that if you enable ambient, you break network policy. Is that accurate?
That's one of the concerns. And the other one is that we are changing the APIs to introduce this concept of strange identity specific to ambient, that is this unknown identity. And users will believe that, hey, this has an MTLS certificate, so it must be secure. We told people, if you have certificates, it means it's secure. That's the definition of MTLS. So now we are pretending that it's, and
maybe
you still cannot.
We have 5 options here, and I don't know which one you're arguing against.
Yeah, let's go through maybe all the options.
In my mind, like half of the options are clearly not viable. So maybe that's the confusion, is that you're talking about one of the options that I had kind of implicitly ruled out. I thought you were pushing for no hairpinning at all. Is that not the case?
No, I'm pushing for an option for users to opt out of capture of to leave plain text alone.
Okay, but the arguments you're using, I feel like, are against bad implementations of capturing. So I'm not sure that I buy that they're at least part of it. Like, in my mind, 3 is the option that is the correct way to do this. And then in that case, there's no client identity. There's not a made up, unknown, fake one. There's just no client identity, just like we have today if you get plain text in a sidecar. So I think that addresses at least some of your concerns. I'm not sure if I remember if that captures all of them. I don't think it will capture all of them because I've got bigger concerns, but
still break network policy, I mean,
it will break network policy, but so does HBone in general, even without ambient, and ambient without waypoints, and ambient even in your proposal that plain text is passed through. Like, if you use ambient, then the ports change, and then network policy is messed up.
No, but in my proposal, network policy is preserved, because if one side is not using ambient, then there is no interception. The network policy applies exactly as it was before. We only capture.
But once both sides use ambient, then network policy is broken, right?
Sure, but you opted into ambient and use ambient policy. You can use identity. I mean, my concern is that with network policy, you can apply some rich policies based on peer identity expressed as labels. With ambient, you can use express policies based on identity. In the middle, you have neither.
So you're worried that the server enables ambient, the client doesn't, and the client's egress policies are broken.
Or the server ingress policy applied for plain text traffic, because the server will have ambient applied for all ambient traffic, both ends, and will use network policy for the non-ambient traffic, for clients that are not in ambient.
I feel like you're saying that the concern is that someone that didn't opt into ambient has network policy broken, but that's not my understanding.
Anyway, we can move on. Sure.
Okay, we go through the list and talk about the ones that we all think don't apply. Like I think John was talking about, like one I don't think matters. So it's like probably the last three are probably the ones we're talking about.
Yeah, let's do that.
So number one is out, I think, right? I didn't
Yeah.
see what number two is.
Number 2 is also out.
Right, out. Yeah, we don't want the weird identities, I don't think. 3, 4, and 5. Okay, yeah, makes sense then. Yeah, three and 4 I think are most appealing to me personally. Mostly I don't like the idea of a weird identity, and I also don't like the idea of letting people write granular policy against something that we can't attest an identity for. And as long as we're meeting that, which I think we are with either of these, because peer authentication is not granular. It's either, you know, it's allowed or not. Like that makes sense to me. And the concern I have, I think, with only capturing inbound HBone is, one, we lose some metrics there, which I think might be confusing to people in telemetry. And also, I feel like there's an opportunity for foot guns there, because it's sort of assuming that other pieces are in place to prevent anything from leaking. And if something else fails somewhere else, then it might actually be easier to leak traffic through without using HBone or MTLS. Sorry, go ahead, Custom.
So I don't think 5 is mutually exclusive with either 3 or 4. I mean, it is.
That's true.
All I'm asking is that users who want to apply network policy to not have ambient touch, non-ambient traffic, to have an option to do it. I mean, if people want to use the others, it's not necessarily. It should be a choice, basically. I mean, I don't want to exclude 5 just because there are some telemetry use cases that may or may not be impacted.
Right, and I mean, is the port exclusion thing in here? I thought I saw that at the bottom or something.
It's at the top.
Yeah, because we could. I feel like it's a little wonky, but you could achieve that with those, include or exclude, depending on what we want to do. Which I think we need that anyway. But yeah.
Sure, but that's hard to use, and
Yeah.
you know, it allow bypass. There are all kind of other implication. And for telemetry, I want to address telemetry in particular, because I heard this argument many times. What proposal makes this smooth, because we no longer rely on the headers, and we can do telemetry without. And we just had a discussion in a previous meeting about, you know, if a workload is not using metadata exchange, to not send the extra headers anyway. So I think it's very reasonable for users to expect that they don't use Istio on both ends to not get the same telemetry.
Right, but they won't get any telemetry, right? For plain text, they won't get it on either end. They won't even see the traffic came in if we don't capture it, right?
Sure, but they don't see it. You know, that's the whole idea. Use mesh, you get telemetry. You don't use mesh. They are not using mesh if one end is not in the mesh.
Yeah, I agree. That's logical, but it also might be a little confusing to people. Yeah. Is the plain TLS to start with? Is that doesn't seem, is that difficult or more difficult than the other options? It doesn't seem like it. That seems at least something we could try.
Still gives the illusion that it's encrypted when it's not.
Why is it not encrypted if it's TLS?
It's half encrypted.
It's
So
encrypted, but it's not authenticated. I think that's the distinction, right? Like, it's not mutually authenticated, but it's still encrypted.
Well, it wasn't encrypted on the first hop between source node and this node.
Yeah.
I mean, it's strictly better to encrypt it than to not encrypt
Yeah,
it, right?
I agree.
Once we get it, yeah.
It's much simpler too. Like it's
Wait a minute. You're saying we have plain text, it's not encrypted, and then instead of just consuming it directly where it reached, we make it more secure by sending it somewhere encrypted and getting it back.
That's the entire point of ambient, is that you don't process it where it is. Unless you want to put the. I don't even know how to answer that. That whole model of waypoint is it's remote, right? That's the entire design goal of ambient.
If you use ambient, but in this case, the user didn't use ambient. It was clearly plain text.
The client doesn't have the choice of whether they're in ambience. The server has deployed a policy that says all traffic going to me needs to go through the waypoint. I'm going to enforce policy there. If we bypass that, then what's the point of the waypoint? It's why would you apply authorization policy at a waypoint if you can just bypass it?
For the mesh traffic, I mean, it's a policy for mesh traffic, not for non-mesh traffic. I mean,
so you want to only apply policy if it's not encrypted traffic? That seems very.
So if you don't have identity of the caller, how can you apply identity? Mesh is identity-based security with MTLS and all the other stuff.
You can write a policy that says, I want to deny post requests from everyone. You could say, I want to deny post requests only from unauthenticated people. You could say, I want to deny post requests only from authenticated people. All of this can be expressed. But if we just cut off the chain and decide for them if it's unauthenticated, it's allowed, that seems extremely broken.
Plus, one of that, like the boundary for mesh is not just authenticated encrypted requests, right? It's a entire proxy layer for network traffic. And so it feels like you should be able to use the APIs that we give them to be able to describe all traffic originating from and target it to their services.
Okay, as long as there is an option to not force people to use this, I mean, we have a way to, I'm happy. I mean, if people want to shoot themselves in the foot, we have plenty of ways to do it.
I don't think that we can ever have an option to deploy a waypoint and not have traffic go to the waypoint. Otherwise, it's fundamentally mismatched with what the goal of waypoint is. Don't use a waypoint then if that's what you want.
You can use a gateway and you have some traffic go through the gateway, some traffic goes directly to the point.
Right, and that's called not using a waypoint.
Using the gateway for some traffic that we want to use the gateway, and others use network policy because
of course, no one's saying that you can't use a gateway in ambient, but it's not using a waypoint proxy, and it's completely separate. A waypoint proxy has meaning that all traffic coming into the service goes through the waypoint proxy. That's the semantics of it. If you just want to have a gateway, then fine, you can do that.
Yeah, I guess you could not use waypoint at all and then just use gateway and then you can react. Okay, that's fine as well. I mean, so basically it's not using waypoint is the best option to not. So if the user doesn't have waypoint, just use a regular gateway, everything is fine. I mean, we are not going to mess with it.
I mean, everything's fine, but the user experience is kind of horrendous. So,
I mean, horrendous is to break network policies, in my opinion. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like we're okay with 3 as an option.
So why not 4? I didn't quite catch why is 4 ruled out.
They're somewhat equivalent, but the idea I think is that it's, to John's point, it's a little better to, once we get the traffic, we should do best effort on it, right? We don't know anything about the source identity, so we can't actually do client identity, but we can, at a minimum, do TLS, right? That's it. That's the best we can do. So let's do that. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like 3 and 4 are a bit confusing to me. Well, partially because I forget what 3 says and I can't read it anymore. But if the thing you're interested in there, Lynn, is the ability to deny, you can. Oh, it is actually mentioned in 3. You can do that. That's what peer authentication is for. If you say strict mode, then plain text traffic's denied. I don't think we even need to send a waypoint in that case. The difference really, at least in my mind, is whether we send it as a one-way TLS HBone connection, or plain text, which it wasn't clear to me if this was H2C tunnel or raw. We can't do raw, so I assume it would be HB2 tunnel without TLS, which feels just more complicated to me. Like then we have to add a different port that's like plain text HBone. It's much simpler to just do everything over TLS in my mind.
Quick question.
So we do TLS, I will make sure I understand. So the source Z tunnel, would it use, which identity would it
No identity.
use? 'Cause so there's no identity, and then the other way has the identity, which is the waypoints identity. Is that?
Yeah.
How the, okay.
Yeah, not non-mutual TLS.
I'm sorry, I'm not an security expert, but how we prevent arbitrary workloads from sending traffic to TLS with no authentication to waypoint, pretending to be a pod and then kind of messing it? Are you sure this is secure? I mean,
how are
zero
you
trust and all
pretending
that
to be a
stuff?
pod if you don't send an identity? The identity is what determines if you are a pod.
I'm saying that, but an attacker pretending to be Z-tunnel, sending traffic to using TLS HBone with no zero trust, no authentication, and then are you sure it consider all the attack vectors and
What's the issue? They have no identity. That's fine. There won't be, if they want to block requests without identity, then they have a policy that denies.
So waypoint would enforce that in that case, right? To be able to tell if this source has the right identity or access.
No, but anyone can pretend to be a waypoint in this case because we don't check it. Well, it's like the chain gateways that we had before.
The waypoint already should enforce peer authentication, right? Based on our normal sidecar stuff. So if you say like don't allow something that doesn't have authentication, then don't allow it. Z-tunnel could also enforce this as like a fast path to just not save that hop.
Okay, if you guys think it's secure, then maybe it is.
I'm not sure I understand what the attack vector is.
So that normally you expect traffic to go to Z-tunnel send to waypoint, and then back.
Yeah.
Are we sure that if someone else, an attacker running somewhere randomly, connecting to waypoint, pretending to be the Z-tunnel that with that particular pod identity, with all the headers and everything else, and waypoint sending it back to the pod that is targeted, will not create any risk?
Like you said,
like it did with the chain
identity,
gateways.
that's the thing that it can't do, right? The attacker doesn't have an identity to put.
So, remember the problems we had with the chain gateways, where you had some gateway in front of the gateways that was injecting all kind of X4, RD4, and all kind of headers, sensitive headers, and we had to add the chaining, which is pretty much weak because it's the same problem. I mean, it's not different here.
But the thing that the hairpin requests don't have an identity associated with them. So if the client, if this attacker, if they have an identity, then even if they're an attacker, that's our security model. If you have an identity, that's who you are. So that's kind of moot and doesn't change by this. If they don't have an identity, then we don't treat them as authenticated, right? I'm not sure where they are impersonating someone. They're not impersonating the Z-tunnel. They're just sending a request that Z-tunnel could send, but nothing in there says that it's from Z-tunnel or trusts it to be from Z-tunnel or anything like that. Right?
Maybe I need to look more. I mean, maybe more people with security experience should review this in terms of zero trust and how it kind of fits.
As long as the waypoint and the Z-tunnel after the hairpin request comes back, as long as they don't take any action on behalf of an identity, I don't see where the privilege escalation comes through. Right? If waypoint and Z-tunnel both regard that original connection as being unauthenticated, no identity, then there's nothing they can do. Like any policy that says you have to have identity, that's going to block that traffic. I can't even think of any access that you might have that requires a certain identity, you're not going to be able to access it, right? It's not assuming the waypoint identity, it's not assuming the Z-tunnel identity, it's just unauthenticated traffic. You have to decide how to handle it.
So there is no sensitive header sent by Z-tunnel, no info in the protocol, in the HBone protocol, and anything that someone could use a waypoint as a way to jump to specific individual IPs because normally waypoint to back to the workload is authenticated and it's pretending to come from some waypoint. It's clearly as a certificate to the waypoint.
As long as the waypoint does not assume that hairpin requests are privileged, then I think we're okay. I'm not making any claims that it does it or not, but as long as the waypoint does not assume that just because it comes from the Z tunnel, it's an authenticated connection, then I think we're good.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, my experience with the previous chaining, it suggests that there will be a way to exploit it. I'll wait until it's implemented and then I'll try to see if I can break it. It's maybe I don't know how to explain it, but probably code will be easier.
Yeah, and I would agree that if you can break it, that's probably something we need to fix in Waypoint or Z-tunnel. It shouldn't allow you to do that to impersonate.
It sounds to me like privilege escalation textbook, but probably I'm not explaining it correctly.
So, Costin, if we go with option 3, do you see any impact for network policy other than the port number?
I mean, network policy will be broken because obviously it will not apply. It will be only Istio policy where we cannot apply any identity-based. So my concern with network policy being broken is that network policy is another way to apply policy based on identity. They express it through labels, we express it through certificates, but it's both of them provide rich, control over who's allowed and who's not allowed.
You can still use network policy though, as long as you don't do policy check on the port number, right?
No, because the traffic will come from the waypoint, so you use the labels are different. So network policy, it's basically the client labels, which is the non-plain text client originally. That one has whatever labels they were originally set.
Okay, so you can still use the policy on the Z-tunnel. That's what I was thinking initially. On the waypoint, I agree because because the hop we added, but that's not unique to this one. It's unique to the whole ambient architecture when you have waypoint in the middle.
Agreed. I mean, I'm not saying user has a clear choice. Either they use network policy or they use SPIFFE-based policies or label-based policies. That's kind of the choice for identity-based policies. If they use label-based policies, that's wonderful. If they work, no problem. If they use SPIFFE identities, they also work. It's the case where half is using one and half is using the other, where bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they will certainly have a network policy to say only allow traffic from waypoint, but or from Z-tunnel. But if we kind of sneak in, that probably people with more security experience and hacking experience than me will have a better way to explain it.
John, do you want to add something here?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to ask, in terms of implementation on 3, just to check my understanding, I'm assuming it involves 2 things. One, a minor change on Z-tunnel to allow sending without identity on hairpin, and 2, on waypoint, allowing requests without identity, probably conditionally based on whether there's a peer authentication.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, Kisa has a question about peer authentications not implemented in waypoint.
Yeah, there's no switch on waypoint right now. The original Ambient API stock had some logic about about essentially implementing peer authentication. Wait, no. Yeah, the original doc had some information about how peer authentication is only relevant for the plain text port of Z-tunnel, not the HBOM port. I think from this, we'd be doing HBone, so it'd still be the HBone port, but we're changing the type of TLS that's being, or it wouldn't be mutual TLS on the HBone port. Is that what we're proposing here?
Well, in the current case, traffic from a waypoint, if ztunnel gets traffic from a waypoint, it doesn't enforce any policy at all because it assumes
Right.
the waypoint enforced it. Now the layering thing should address that, in which case we're going to need to have waypoint tell us the identity and trust it, probably with exported client cert or whatever, at which point it would not put an identity in the hairpin case. I think, does that make sense?
Yes. I think my question is more around that the conditionalness of peer authentication and where it applies as far as the ports go. So we're still, for this plain TLS, no MTLS, we're still using the HBone port, correct? Or is HBone only
So
MTLS?
yes, but at the waypoint. Like we would never
Yes,
get
yes,
plain TLS on ztunnel.
Correct. Okay, got it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the waypoint, yes, the waypoint will need to account for that.
Yeah, so ideally, I think it would be nice if the user doesn't have to worry about apply peer authentication to waypoint, because that's an actual thing we're asking them to do. So
They
it
don't
would be
apply it
nice.
to the waypoint. They apply it to the. It's just like an authorization policy. They apply it to the destination pods, and we'll enforce that.
Right, to the destination. Yeah. Okay.
But we enforce it in the waypoint.
Right, enforces it at waypoint. Okay.
Basically, if they have strict, we just insert an additional policy that says block it if there's no identity. Something. I don't know the details of how it'll work, but conceptually.
So do we need to remove? Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's right. If it's hairpinned back from the waypoint, we don't apply any policy in the ztunnel. So that takes care of that case. And if there's no waypoint, then ztunnel would still apply the converted peer authentication like we do today. Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
I think whenever we do this, we need to include diagrams of all the cases when things are enforced. Otherwise, we're going to be having these conversations forever.
Yeah, I'll take that on. Since I did the peer authentication stuff, I'll write a doc for how it currently works, and then get with Stephen to make sure I have a good understanding of what's being proposed here, and add that so we have something comprehensive.
Sounds like we have a plan. Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good. Sorry, I'm just reading the custom comment.
What I'm not clear on in your example is how does the user allow hairpin traffic? So they allow.
Because
go ahead.
They have some legitimate hairpin use case. I mean, they have some policies that allow traffic. Let's say you have, I mean, if you block everything, it's fine. But if you have some allow, that means there is a path where traffic from a plain text pod goes to pod, destination pods, and to waypoint and go back. That means that anyone else can pretend to be the, original ztunnel, inject whatever they want, and still make the same request as the original pod. Will go to the waypoint and pretty much forge anything else that was part of the protocol, because there is no way to know that the ztunnel that originated the request to waypoint is really ztunnel and not something else. We don't authenticate ztunnel. It just can come from anyone. I mean, the whole zero trust is based on the idea that you at each point you don't trust that some network boundaries or something. It's really who they pretend to be without any authentication. Isn't that fundamental zero trust and what we are based on, the fact that you never trust a request to be from?
Yeah, I think kind of agreeing with Costin. There are some cases in the code where we say we trust this header because it's from the waypoint. For example, we have exported whatever the IP is, exported for, and then we spoof the source IP. So now anyone that can connect to a waypoint obviously can spoof an arbitrary IP, whereas before it was only people in the mesh can spoof a. Well, actually, they're not spoofing the IP. We should find where we're trusting the waypoint, but I'm not sure that they actually tangibly change things directly. And like, I don't think it violates zero trust. Like the Z tunnel, if it gets a request from waypoint, says it trusts that it's from the waypoint, but it doesn't necessarily trust that the previous request that the waypoint received was also trusted, unless the waypoint says it was, right?
But we do trust that it came from the waypoint because we don't apply any policy to the request afterwards.
Yeah, which is still fine. It still came from the waypoint, and there still should have been policy applied, right?
But that's
it would
the
be
thing.
invalid to say the request came from the waypoint, therefore the original request 2 hops back was from someone in the mesh. Hopefully we don't do that. That would be invalid, I think. If the waypoint told us that with exported something, then I think that's fine. Like, you just trust the last hop to tell us what we should trust, right? We shouldn't implicitly trust more than that.
If someone forges the appropriate headers to make it look like the previous request was in the mesh, how do we actually validate? Essentially, I think what this boils down to is, how did the waypoint and Z-tunnel validate that requests came from each other? Are we doing any kind of checks to confirm that?
Well, that part's normal plain MTLS identity check. We have a waypoint identity, and Z-tunnel identities plural, and they check each other. I think Costin's concern is that there'll be headers from the initial attacker's request forwarded from the waypoint to Z-tunnel, and Z-tunnel will trust those headers. Is that accurate?
It's just an example. I mean, there's an entire category of privilege escalations that can go through this mechanism.
To remove ambient terms, this feels like I have a gateway that has TLS, and then the gateway does MTLS to my backend with a sidecar.
Yes, that's in the same category with all the ingress exploits and our previous CVEs on exported for and all the other sensitive data.
So can you explain what the issue is there? Because that's how every user vStio runs, right? You have ingress, and ingress does MTLS to your backend.
True, but the gateway is doing some checks on the, it's not accepting exported for or any sensitive header, or nowadays is no longer doing that.
But the waypoint should also do the same behavior, right?
So you're saying the waypoint should drop all the headers from the HBone and then do what? I mean, why do we do HBone in the first place if we drop all the information from because we don't trust it?
What header specifically?
So
like the only one that's propagated should be baggage. So yes, baggage, I guess, is a concern, I would say.
So why do we do HBone in the first place, and what do we pass through HBone? Just
the way the real thing in the waypoint really is that's required is the destination, because we want to connect to the waypoint, but say we're connecting to some other IP address, right?
How
really
about
the only thing that's required.
Let's find some people with real security experience, because I'm not. It just feels very fishy to me and feels like a repeat for previous CVs. That's my concern, and I don't think we are going to sort it out in this meeting, or I'm going to be the best one to exploit it.
Now, Costin, a clarification question on what you are raising. This is only a problem if my workload on the destination, say, I accept if I enforce mutual TLS through pure authentication, this is not a problem, right? It's only a problem if I don't enforce strict mutual TLS on my workload.
Yeah, no, it's only a problem if we mess with plain text and do this kind of stuff where we open some ports without any zero trust checks, and where we just accept TLS traffic from random people with no checks, and then we treat it as if it's coming from zTunnel. For normal ambient or both ends have certificates and all legs are mutually authenticated, and we have real trust that it's perfectly fine.
I
Just
think
when
the
we
issue
open,
is that we're not treating it like it came from zTunnel. We're treating it like it's unauthenticated.
Yeah.
zTunnel happens to look the same because it's also unauthenticated, but there's nowhere where we're trusting that an unauthenticated request is from zTunnel. To put it another way, zTunnel traffic is unauthenticated, but unauthenticated traffic is not necessarily from zTunnel, and the waypoint must assume that.
okay, if we are sure that doesn't open a path to escalation of privilege, then let's see how it works.
I think I agree. I think what John just said is a really good thing to document. That is that the waypoint should make no assumptions about the sender of its traffic. I think that's another way of phrasing what you just said. The other thing that I'll just call out is if you think about the implications of not doing regular TLS, then what you've got is traffic leaving the node unencrypted, which feels like not plausible from a user requirement perspective. So I want to call that out.
Well, it was unencrypted in the first place, so just putting some lipstick and pretending that one leg is encrypted is not going to change the fact that traffic is still going plain text and can be man in the middle and do whatever.
I mostly agree with you, but in hypothetical edge case, you could be having same node communication, and you were fine with it because it was on the same node, and now it's leaving the node. But I mostly agree.
Yeah, but then you break. You have the biggest problem of that I described, which is far bigger than this one.
Yes.
You break.
Okay, so Costin, why don't you maybe offline talk to security team to see if there's any other concern, if what you raise is a big concern, and then maybe circle back with the team next week?
I'm not entirely sure who would be expert in this kind of hacking and attacks, not just creating certificates.
Well, if so, maybe if there's no further objection, sounds like there are people in consensus that maybe implement this, and then you can try to break it.
As long as you have an option to disable, I'm happy. I mean, I just want to make sure that people have a way to opt out.
Oh yeah, they can definitely disable it, right? I mean, they can enable PO authentication on the target to prevent this from happening.
I mean, disable hair pinning. I mean, have an option where users can opt to not have hair pinning and just let network policies handle it. And, basically, it's the fifth option to, not keep it as exclusive, but also have an option to do this, plus this hair pinning.
But that's the extra complexity, unless we prove there's a problem with this.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Costin, do you want to deny it or pass it through?
To do whatever the user specifies in network policy, not intercept it, not touch it. The option is to not intercept traffic that is not ours.
It is ours because we deployed a waypoint. That's by deploying a waypoint, you're saying I want all traffic to go through the waypoint. And if you don't want that, then don't deploy waypoint, which you can already do today. I don't think we should violate that I don't know, whatever you call it, statement. You can deny it so you don't do hairpinning with strict MTLS, or you can not deploy a waypoint. But I think bypassing a waypoint is not something we should do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it really adds complexity to our user too. I mean, they have to think through, why would I have an option, right? This goes back to all the complexity we're trying to avoid with ambient.
But these arguments, I mean, are clear. You have local traffic that is not going to be, it's going to be cheap, not expensive. You have, network policies that apply. There are plenty of benefits of.
Then don't deploy a waypoint proxy. I don't know. I feel like maybe this is making a lot of assumptions, but I feel like your concern is that you don't like waypoint proxies. And the answer should just be to not use a waypoint proxy then.
No, I like waypoint proxies for mesh traffic where you can have all the identity and all the power of the mesh. And you want to have waypoint for some traffic, but not for all of it. I mean, you may have a port that is just local between pods on the same node where you just want to have maximum speed, and you may have an HTTP port where you want waypoint. There are multiple ports on a pod, not only one. The waypoint is for all ports. I mean, you apply waypoint, absolutely everything is going to it. There is no way to say that the local communication for which is in affinity and all the other stuff. It's and network policy and some ports are.
I would be less concerned about something like a server-side policy that says, these ports are waypoint enabled or these ones aren't, than doing it based on the client attributes, whether it's TLS or not.
That's fine too.
Say like opt out this port from waypoint. That to me makes a lot of sense.
That's fine too. I mean, my concern is to not have exclusive. You cannot only use waypoint across, and absolutely all traffic must go to waypoint versus having some selectivity where this traffic I want to apply network policy for.
Yeah, I guess my concern was, I could see a policy that you specify that says when to send to the waypoint, and okay, I'm convinced, but I don't think it's an additional feature. Sorry. I think I agree with your concerns that this is very security sensitive and may or may not be exploitable. It's also very much better than what we have today. The current behavior is obviously wrong and broken. So I think the consensus here is that we should do this and be willing to do more and look into it more to improve it. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Yep, that sounds right. All right, should we wrap this meeting up?
Yeah, thanks everyone. This was useful. Thanks for putting the doc together, Stephen. Also, is Stephen or Steve planning on implementing this, or?
I can do it. I mean, we'll work it out.
Okay, just want to make sure there's not 2 or 0 people. So, cool. See you all.
Hi, everyone.